I'd like to welcome to your show and mine, Bobby Ramos, Bottom Line, the author of a fantastic book, Macho Time, The Meteoric Rise and Tragic Fall of Hector Macho Camacho, authored by my buddy, Mr. Christian Guidice. Christian, welcome back to the show. Christian, I think it's great that you focused just about all of your book on Camacho's life and where he came from, and not just his death. Like all the other Latino fighters and most fighters, period, these cats came from poverty. Talk a little bit more about just what it was like for Camacho being raised in Spanish Harlem in New York to rise and be a 3 different weight champion.
Yeah, I mean, at the time when they came, like I said, at age 4, he came back to Spanish Harlem from Puerto Rico, and they were fleeing an abusive father, and the problem is that his mother Maria couldn't find work at the time, and she was so they were moving all over Spanish Harlem and trying to find a place to live, but at the same time that a lot of the places didn't have heat. I mean, just certain places they wanted to find and settle into a place that gave them a sense of permanency. But his father followed the family and eventually came back and to live with them. And so it wasn't only the poverty, but also the fear that he had to protect his mother at a young age. So I think those things combined, and then realizing that he had Maria Camacho was excellent mother in the sense that they always, even in the most difficult times, they always had food on the table, and that was something that his sisters mentioned. And I think that not only the poverty,
he loved his mother's oatmeal.
Yeah,
loved his mother's oatmeal.
Well, the relationship with Hector and his mother was something that you didn't go near. It was untouchable. I mean, he loved her dearly. But when you talk about the things that he was doing, the issue is, and I think and I mentioned this in the book, is that he may have grown up in poverty, but he never felt as if he was poor. And I think I wanted to make that distinction in the book itself, because that family was always around. There was always a sense of community in Spanish Harlem. And I think that, and this was from quotes that I was able to piece together, that it didn't feel like they were subjected to that level of poverty at the time. And when you look back at some of these other fighters that I wrote about, I think that, that having that strong family backbone was able to a lot of times just I don't want to say reduce that feeling of what time is. It's macho time.
Macho time.
It's macho time.
There you go.
But he had a difficult childhood. Just also transition to living in New York, but he was tough. I mean, and moving from karate to boxing, and kind of honing his skills.
Loved him some Bruce Lee.
Yeah,
his guy was Bruce Lee, which is tragic in itself, with both of them being shot to death. One by accident, one not. But he loved Bruce Lee.
Yeah, and they were at the movie theater. One of his old friends told me this story about it. They were at a movie theater, okay, and Hector showed up in the Bruce Lee outfit, and they were on a double date. Really? He showed up in the black and yellow Bruce Lee outfit, and these guys behind them started mocking him, right. and Hector just stayed cool, didn't say a thing.
Right.
And then they didn't say anything else. And then later on, as the movie continued, they started mocking him again. And his friend explained it as Hector just turned around and gave them a look. and that was the look like, I know you're there, and
You don't want none of this. You don't want this.
You don't
You
want
don't want this. Right.
In other words, it's Macho Time. So at the end of the movie, they were all leaving, and they're outside the theater, and Hector says, "Hey, buddy, hold on for a second." And he goes over these guys, and I guess the girls looked at his friend and said, "Are you going to do anything? Are you going to do something about this? You're going to help him?" And by the time he turned around, Hector knocked out both of the two of the guys, and the last one was running away. So it was, I think if you just looked at him and his size, you would never guess that he was just one of the toughest guys on the street.
No,
I mean,
I stood next to him at a fight in New York, and we were just going back and forth, just talking and stuff. And I was shocked at how small he was to me. I mean, he wasn't he just because of TV and us watching, and we see guys destroy guys, they seem bigger than some of them actually are. And he seemed like just a regular brother off the streets. But knowing him, I knew you didn't want to get on his other side because I knew what he could do. But he physically wasn't an imposing guy. It's just he beat your ass in a minute, and he didn't really need too many excuses to do it. That being said,
I want to add one thing, Bobby. Bobby, let me add one thing. And just and I apologize for cutting you off there, but the interesting thing about with all of these fighters, they were all good street fighters.
Right.
But Hector, I just found it really interesting that he was a guy who, even if you were his best friend, it didn't matter. Like you had, if he was upset, he would beat you up and then he'd come over your house the next day. And he was just that type of guy. And so you have a lot of, but at the same time, a lot of those guys he grew up with, they just loved him dearly. And that was just, that was also part of Spanish Harlem. Like you fought, you got up, you shook hands, and you moved on.
It was over. It was over. Yeah. Another thing I wanted to talk about. You talked about he had an issue, and you were talking, and folks, you need to get this book. All of the stuff we're talking about and so much more is in this great book that we're talking about today. He wanted to be accepted by native-born Puerto Ricans as one of their own, and he felt that they classified him as an outsider. In '83, when he fought Salas, Rafael Solis, he got booed and heckled, and you wrote in the book where he said he felt like he was an inferior Puerto Rican, and he said that I'm Puerto Rican, but if you don't want me, I'm macho. Forget it. Close quote. He was a deeply sensitive guy, and that's the other side of him, because everybody knew the flamboyant and the mouthy and the talk all kinds of trash, but he had a real sensitive side to him.
Yeah, I wanted to bring from the beginning. I wanted to bring that out in him. I wanted people to understand that this is the same guy after a fight with Tim Ryan during an interview broke down and said, "I need friends." I mean, it was just he was a different type of guy. Like you said, he felt there was a sense of he wanted to be accepted, and he didn't understand it. Like he didn't understand that. They had, even when he was fighting another Puerto Rican fighter, whether it was Rosario or Solis, there were those Puerto Ricans who just did not accept him. And he felt like he'd done everything to gain their acceptance. Like, what haven't I done? What more do I need to do to prove to you that I'm a true Puerto Rican? And although some people downplayed that and didn't feel like it was a big issue, I felt like through a lot of the interviews and a lot of the research that I did, that this was a very sensitive topic with him. And like you said with that quote, he even came out and a lot of the things that Hector Camacho said, there are some things that he had to take with a grain of salt. But I truly believe that he meant when he said, you know what? if you don't want me, forget you. I mean, this is me. I've done enough to deserve your respect.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, but sensitive didn't just end there, Bobby. I think it went to every aspect of his life. When you talk about overly sensitive, I think, and I think a lot of it stemmed from the problems he was having outside the ring, and the
Right.
fact that they had just built up over time. But and I also think that he felt that having gone to being looked at even from a young age as that kid from Rikers, having done time, and he didn't
Stealing the
feel,
car.
yeah, and he just felt like I've been trying to break away from that ever since, and so he'd be upset about that. He's like, I'm not that kid anymore. I've done enough. Here I am. I'm winning my second title, my third title. All right. I don't want to be known forever as this, troubled kid coming out of Spanish Harlem. But the problem is that even after he said that, he'd do something to kind of reinforce that particular label,
Right.
which was sad in itself.
I tell you what I liken him to, and I never really thought about it until listening to you talk. Another supremely talented champion went through the same thing, and that was Oscar De La Hoya. He went through the same thing. Remember, he felt he wasn't, because he wasn't, the Mexicans loved tough fighters, and he was a good-looking guy that all the ladies loved, and he felt he wasn't accepted by a lot of the men in Mexico because he wasn't flamboyant, but he was just a different style fighter. They wanted you to go out on your shield, and De La Hoya would, but he was just so supremely talented, and yeah, he had some ballerina in him. And I'm not just trying to be funny. He could have been another Sugar Ray. He just had that style that a lot of Mexican men did not like. And I think Camacho dealt with some of that as far as his own Puerto Rican community.
I wonder if that's it. I didn't touch upon that in the book because I think, with Solis, so when you matched Hector, first of all, when he fought Bazooka Limon and won the first title in 1983, he was.
What's the big deal? When you beat a man named Bazooka, you ain't no joke. Go ahead. I'm sorry, man.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, he beat a real tough guy in Bazooka Limon, and a great, a really good Mexican fighter who was on the back end of his career. But I mean, the Puerto Rican fans, I mean, he did it in front of all of Puerto Rico. So he'd won them over at that point. Right. So I don't think there was concern there. He said, I just won a title. It's almost like I just won a title for you. And then he came back to defend it. And I think that's where the shock value came in. Wait, almost like, wait a second. I was just here and I just destroyed a Mexican fighter. We have this huge rivalry. What are we talking about here? This is a little bit unjustified. So I think that De La Hoya's was more about the style.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I don't think that was as much as I don't think that played into the argument where Puerto Ricans didn't love or didn't respect Hector. I feel like it was maybe something else because when he beat Solis, I mean, he knocked him out. I mean, he just, he knocked him out with a brutal knockout punch. And then he stood up to Edwin Rosario, even though, he got hit a couple times. I mean, he showed his toughness. So I think it's probably something else, jealousy. I don't know what it was at the time, but
he showed his toughness also September '92 when he fought Julio Cesar Chavez, who was 81-0 at the time. He lost, he got beat, but he showed how tough he was. I mean, he got it handed to him that night. He didn't quit. He didn't do no mas. He took it, and I think that some people gained even though he lost, gained a different kind of respect for him because he showed that he was a tough son of a bitch, even though he lost.
Yeah, and that's the irony of his career, right? I mean, he had to take a beating in order to gain respect, and which was at that stage, because that fight was supposed to be made, many years earlier. And can you imagine that fight in 1985? That would have been spectacular. After he beat Jose Luis Ramirez, and he fights Chavez. I mean, what a fight that would have been, because Hector would have been in shape. He was fast. He could move. All the things that Chavez didn't like. And then it didn't happen until much later. At that point, and it's such a strange thing to think about. But I mean, you watch that fight and you think that Chavez was, the young up and coming fighter who was just rolling through guys, which he was at the time, but he wasn't a young up and coming. They're the same age, and you wouldn't know that by the way that the fight was, the promotion was handled, because Hector, for the first time in his life, did not want to incite Chavez. He did not want to do it because he knew the repercussions. You get this guy mad, and you pay the price. There's a real harsh price you pay with Chavez, because he's not going to knock you out, but you're gonna
punish him.
Yeah, he's going to punish you.
He's going to do what Ali did to Floyd Patterson.
Right.
He's going to punish you. He ain't going to knock you out. He could have. And the press killed Clay then, but they killed him for that because they said he was so mean-spirited that he could have knocked him out, but he wanted to punish him, for calling him Clay. And, here's another thing. Sugar Ray Leonard, who, as I said earlier, lost to Macho, and he had said in your book, he said that he found, and they liked each other a lot. He said, Sugar Ray said, and I quote, "I thought I was cocky. Camacho surpasses me by 3 or 4 levels." Close quote. That being said, do you think, as much as you've seen the other side of Camacho, do you think that cockiness was 100% raw cockiness and real? Or do you think, I think it was hiding some of his insecurities?
Well,
he wanted to be liked, he wanted to be loved. And most guys who were that cocky may not always feel that way. I kind of think he was a two-sided monster.
Right. No, I think
within himself, not towards people, within himself.
Yeah, I mean, you said it hides insecurities. I mean, there's no doubt that he was using that brash, almost that really arrogant, boisterous style to hide a lot of the insecurities that he was feeling as he, especially as an older fighter. He realized that he needed to, change his identity. In his mind, he needed to change his identity, but along with that meant changing his style, and which may have, lengthened his career. But at the same time, it hurt his legacy, because, and I think it all goes back to the idea that, he's becoming this, he's becoming this particular, I don't want to say a caricature almost, but he's coming into this character who is, now I'm the macho man, and I'm going to use these costumes, and it felt like a lot of times it felt genuine, but like you said, it hit all the things that he was going through, and he was an emotionally troubled guy who, at the time, even when people wanted to approach him and say, "Hey, you got to slow down the way you're living," he would brush it off. You just couldn't talk to him. So I think there's that insecurity level that he was trying to get, like this facade he was creating. Not only to sell tickets, but also to kind of, blind people to who he really was. And I think, Bobby, that character came out, the real Hector came out sometimes. I think it emerged at times, but he quickly put it away. I mean, you rarely saw it for lengthy periods of times. It would emerge, like I said, with the Tim Ryan interview. I mean, that was shocking to see him crying on national TV. But then it was Macho Time the next morning, right? I mean, it wasn't something that he dwelled on. So I think you hit it right on the spot when you said that he was hiding his own insecurities.
And here he is, crying on Tim Ryan right there. Another fighter who was masking the same kind of insecurities was his buddy Mike Tyson. Tyson has said he's a real sensitive guy, for the nastiest guy on the planet. People didn't imagine he was home feeding pigeons and all that. He was just a super sensitive guy who would cry at the drop of a hat. Okay, so some of these guys, they have to put up that facade because of what their business is, and they have to handle their business. But there is another side to him. There's a guy on page 97 in his fantastic book Macho Time. I forgot his first name, but his last name was Maida, M-A-I-D-A, and he said that Hector, he was a lifelong friend. He said Hector liked to be by himself. This shocked me. He said he liked to be by himself, and he never trusted friends, that he was always more to himself. That's who he was. He was more of a loner, close quote. That shocked me.
Yeah, no one would have guessed that. I mean, that shocked me when I remember that interview and thinking, but the fact is that and that Maeda that's the mother of Hector Jr.
Okay.
And so she when she first came out and said that, she wasn't the first one to say that. Like, another one of his acquaintances in Spanish Harlem would say, he was a guy who liked the attention. When he was around, he wanted to be the center of the attention, but he probably felt more comfortable by himself, or just kind of in his own thoughts. And I think that's I don't want to say it's shocking, but I think if someone who didn't know Hector and only knew him as the Macho Man, you would never, you couldn't even imagine that Hector Camacho was a guy who wanted to be on his own. I mean, just because everybody gravitates towards him, even when he's not really, he would take risks and do anything, to get people's attention. And a lot of times, these risks were, had consequences that made people around him feel it really hurt people around him. And sometimes he didn't see that. But it just shows you how many different facets to his personality that he had.
And for the folks who don't know or don't remember, Christian's talked twice about crying in the ring to the CBS announcer Tim Ryan, who likes him a lot. That was right on television, and when you watch it, it was so sad. He had just won a fight, and he says to Tim Ryan, "Will you be my friend? I need friends." And he put his head on his chest and just started crying. And Tim Ryan says, we have a young man here who just won a fight, and he's full of emotions, and he was trying to cover up for him, and he just wasn't this bragging all the time, tough guy who was talking shit all the time. He just wasn't that. Let me ask you this. Camacho's drug problems are well documented. When do you think they started, and why?
Well, I think they started when he was, probably in his teens, in Spanish Harlem. I mean, I think probably, it was, and I think so and I know that for a fact because in one of his interviews he admits to it. In Spanish Harlem, everybody smokes. When they became intense, or they intensified, I think it's probably as he as he got closer through his amateurs and then leading into his professional, he probably was able to pull away from them as he prepared for each fight. So I think they started at a very young age because, as he said, it was just, everyone in Spanish Harlem, this was the norm. So I don't think he, an outside observer may look at it and say, it ruined his career. But he probably doesn't look at it like he wouldn't look at it like that. He would just, it was a part of the culture that he grew up in.
Right.
What's fascinating about Camacho is that he was able to somehow remain an elite fighter and still not not remove that element of the drug element out of his life. I mean, it stayed with him throughout, according to the research that I did. He never truly stopped, but it never permeated his career to the point where he had to stop. And usually when you see these sad stories, it's because drugs take over your life, and you can't manage them anymore. And then obviously you stop boxing. But Hector was able to balance both those worlds, and that's something that I do not have an answer for. I have no idea how he was able to be able to take drugs and still for as long as he did remain one of the top fighters in the sport. So because I remember Sugar. For me, it depends on how you look at his career. I mean, I don't think he was, after 1985, I don't think he was, he reached that elite status again. And so, some people don't accept that. Some people think he was still an elite fighter later on, but I have a tendency to believe that his prime was 1980 through 85.
Right. The other thing about him, he didn't have a lot of formal education, but he was a really smart guy. He was a very intelligent guy. He just didn't have the formal education. And Sugar Ray Leonard, once again, who really enjoyed him, said that as a fighter, and Sugar Ray had everything. He said that Macho had the whole package, that when he was at his best, he was perfect. And that's from Sugar Ray Leonard. That's a big deal. That for him to say that about somebody just carried a lot of weight with me. I don't know. I don't know if Macho was a dream deferred. It's kind of hard to say that when somebody was a 3-time champ in 3 different divisions, but it was obvious later in life, the drugs took over, and the whole thing with the cops and hiding the cocaine in the jail and all that stuff. The drugs had really taken over him. And that's why I loved one of your earlier questions when you said you would have asked him, did he ever seek any kind of help? Folks, you're listening to Your Show and Mine, Bobby Ramos, Bottom Line, here with Christian Guidice. I think I got it right that time.
You got it right.
Author of the fantastic book, Macho Time, The Meteoric Rise and the Tragic Fall of Hector Macho Camacho. Page 84. Explain this to me, because I never found out why. He visited the White House and President Ronald Reagan. How was that hooked up, and why?
Well, at the time, and so the reason as to why he was chosen, I didn't get into that because I talked to his trainer at that time, who was Ismail Leandri, and he just didn't have. I didn't get an answer about why he was. I mean, he was. Oh, well, actually, I do know the reason why he was there is because Ronald Reagan absolutely loved him as a fighter. So I guess that would be the, okay. I was thinking of more. I think that's the main thing, is that Reagan called for him because he called him an artist in the ring, and that was huge. I mean, seeing that picture of Hector Camacho in the White House is mind-boggling.
From Spanish Harlem in the streets to the White House with the most staunch and Republican of Republicans, Ronald Reagan, on top
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah. And you know, it just goes to show you the different avenues, the different, you know, the different worlds that Hector. I mean, Hector is pretty comfortable in a lot of different social settings. You know, and sometimes, you know, maybe that's not true in all the social settings, but I think, you know, his style. I mean, just looking at him and looking at that, you know, whether he had the tail in the back, yeah, the leather jacket, the half shirt,
The curl in the front,
yeah,
yeah,
the spit curl. I mean,
yeah,
there was, when you talk, he said, you know, I'm the kid of the '80s. I mean, he was. I mean, he
right,
was. I mean, you know, when you look at all the things that he was able to kind of reflect in his style, in the way he boxed, in the way that, you know, you know, he entertained. I mean, you know, Hagler, Leonard, Duran, Holmes, Spinks, they were all great fighters of the '80s.
right.
I don't think any of them was able to, you know, put together that full package. I mean, we talk about pure boxers. You know, I don't think you know, Camacho didn't do didn't do throughout his career what those guys did. It'd be hard to compare them. But when you talk about what he was able to, you know, put together in the full package, as far as promotions and you know, flair and charisma
Right.
and speed. I mean, it's hard to, you couldn't make it up. You couldn't, you know, reinvent a guy like Hector
No.
Camacho.
Family, thanks for listening and always supporting your show and mine, Bobby Ramos, Bottom Line. I don't want to be a man of power, but I do want to be a man of purpose. I'm Bobby Ramos. Thank you for your time this time. Until next time.